Hello everyone. My name is Alara. Today I want to open a door to a room in my past that I usually keep double locked. It is a memory that sits in the pit of my stomach like a stone, a heavy reminder of a time when the lines between love, curiosity, and morality blurred into something I can never undo. It is a story I sometimes wish I could scrub from my mind. But life, as we know, doesn't come with an undo button. It all started years ago, back when I was 18. We were living in a sprawling, historic estate on the outskirts of Lyon, France. The house was magnificent, filled with long, echoing corridors and secrets, much like the city itself. Back then, I lived in a bubble of perceived perfection. My parents were incredibly successful, my father, a high-ranking diplomat, and my mother, a renowned curator for art galleries. They were brilliant people, but their calendars were always full. Despite their busy lives, they tried to make time for me and my two older twin brothers, Julian and Adrian. Julian and Adrian were 2 years my senior, and they wore that age gap like a badge of honor. They ensured I never wanted for anything, whether it was the latest fashion or a shoulder to cry on. But, if I'm being honest, the affection I received from my parents, while genuine, felt distant compared to the intense bond I shared with the twins. My relationship with Julian and Adrian was different. Before I dive deeper into this confession, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel for more real, life stories. Make sure to watch until the very end, and if you appreciate my honesty, hit that like button. Believe me, this is a journey you'll want to hear through to its conclusion. My brothers were more than just siblings, they were my guardians. Their love felt tangible, expressed through fierce loyalty rather than just gifts. While my parents ensured I had a comfortable lifestyle, Julian and Adrian tended to my heart. They seemed to have a sixth sense for when I was down, picking up on my sadness before I even spoke a word. Growing up, they were my safe harbor. If I stumbled or faced cruelty from others, they were there. I remember once, in middle school, a group of girls mocked me for my accent. Julian and Adrian didn't just offer comforting words. They went to the school and spoke to those girls with such icy, articulate precision that I was never bothered again. They were my heroes, standing tall between me and the world. I remember family gatherings where I would squeeze onto the sofa between them. They would drape their arms over my shoulders, playfully bickering over who was my favorite. They called me their little queen, and swore a solemn oath to protect me forever. As I matured, I realized their devotion was unique. They were the ones who helped me navigate the insecurities of adolescence. Adrian taught me how to style my hair when I felt plain, telling me I was radiant. Julian helped me curate a wardrobe that made me feel confident. I felt cherished, and with our parents often traveling, they became my emotional anchors. They drove me to school, helped with complex history assignments, and ensured silence never turned into loneliness. On nights when insomnia struck, I'd wander to their room, and they would let me sit with them, sharing stories until my eyes grew heavy. It was this intimacy, this absolute trust, that convinced me their love was the purest thing in my world. But that very closeness, which I thought was innocent, was the catalyst for what came next. I'll share the rest, though my heart races just thinking about it, because I was the baby of the family. I was used to being tactile and affectionate without a second thought. I would hug them freely or lean against them while they read. To me, they were extensions of myself, people with whom I had zero barriers. One sweltering afternoon in July, I wandered out of my bedroom. The golden summer light was filtering through the French doors of the library, dusting everything in a warm haze. Julian and Adrian were seated on the velvet love seat, their eyes glued to a laptop screen. They were so engrossed they didn't hear my footsteps on the parquet floor. Curious, and feeling a bit mischievous, I crept closer. Rubbing sleep from my eyes. "What's the big secret?" I asked, my voice light and teasing. I flopped down onto the armrest of the sofa, leaning over Julian's shoulder. "What are we watching with such intense focus?" They froze. The silence was immediate and deafening. When I looked at the screen, it wasn't a video game or a documentary. It was a film, an intense, romantic drama. The scene was at its peak, the characters entangled in a passionate, raw embrace. Seeing me staring, Julian and Adrian scrambled. Adrian quickly slammed the laptop shut, his face flushing a deep crimson. "Alara! Don't look at that!" Adrian snapped, his voice cracking slightly. "It's not for you." I laughed, trying to snatch the laptop back. "I'm not a child anymore, Adrian. I'm 18, I countered, though my pulse had quickened. "I watch movies like that, you know." I tried to pry Adrian's fingers from the lid, laughing and teasing them for being so prudish. In the tussle, my hand slipped and brushed against Julian's chest. His heart was hammering against his ribs, so hard I could feel it through his shirt. The physical reaction startled me. It wasn't the reaction of a brother annoyed by his sister. It was the reaction of a man who was flustered. I pulled my hand back as if I'd been burned. The atmosphere shifted instantly. I'm sorry, I stammered. I stood up abruptly and retreated to my room, shutting the door firmly. I sat on the edge of my bed, my mind racing. The image of the scene on the screen, combined with the frantic beating of Julian's heart, made my face burn. Was I reading too much into it? Was it just an embarrassing coincidence? I didn't know, but a strange sense of shame settled over me. I couldn't leave my room. The idea of facing them, of acknowledging that I had crossed some invisible, unspoken line of privacy, was paralyzing. That evening, hunger finally forced me out. I assumed my parents would be home and the buffer of their presence would help. But the house was quiet. I tiptoed toward the kitchen, hoping to grab a snack and retreat. But as I passed the lounge, I paused. I didn't see anyone. Strange. I whispered to myself. Suddenly, two heads popped up from behind the high-backed armchair. Boo! I shrieked, jumping back and clutching my chest. Julian and Adrian burst into laughter, the tension from the afternoon seemingly replaced by their usual prankster dynamic. You look like you've seen a ghost, Elora. Julian crowed, wiping a tear from his eye. You two are impossible, I yelled, though I was laughing too, the adrenaline washing away the awkwardness. You nearly gave me a heart attack. You looked so guilty sneaking around, Adrian teased, walking over to ruffle my hair. What were you up to? Nothing. Just looking for food. I lied, my cheeks pink. Come on then, Julian said, wrapping an arm around my shoulder. Let's eat. Mom and Dad are late again. We ate dinner, and the conversation flowed easily. We joked, we talked about music, and for a few hours, I convinced myself that the incident in the library was forgotten. I went to bed feeling relieved. My brothers were still just my brothers. However, the next morning brought a reality I wasn't prepared for. The walls of our old estate were beautiful, but thin. I was usually a heavy sleeper, but I woke up around 80 today. To a low, rhythmic sound coming from the adjacent room, the twins' bedroom. At first, through the haze of sleep, I thought they were gaming. But as my mind cleared, the sounds became distinct. It wasn't the chaotic noise of a video game. It was voices, breath, the unmistakable audio of the kind of movie I had caught them watching the day before. My heart began to pound in my throat. Why was I listening? Why couldn't I move? I pulled the pillow over my head, trying to drown it out, telling myself it was none of my business. They were young men, this was normal. But the knowledge that it was them, right next door, created a chaotic storm of emotions in me, embarrassment, curiosity, and a strange, forbidden intrigue. I sat up, kicked off the covers, and paced my room. I needed to leave. I needed to get water. Anything to break the spell. I opened my door slowly, stepping into the corridor. The floorboards creaked. As I passed their door, the sound stopped abruptly. The door to their room swung open. I froze. Adrian stood there, looking disheveled, his eyes wide and panicked. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. We stared at each other for what felt like a lifetime. The air was thick, charged with something heavy and unspoken. Alara, he breathed out, his voice shaky. What are you doing? I was just getting water, I lied, my voice barely a whisper. I couldn't look him in the eye. Julian appeared behind him, looking equally flushed and guilty. The silence stretched, suffocating us. I didn't hear anything. I blurted out a terrible, transparent lie. I'm going downstairs. I turned on my heel and fled back to my room, locking the door. I leaned against the wood, gasping for air. The image of their faces, flustered, vulnerable, and undeniably handsome, burned in my mind. The taboo nature of it twisted in my gut. I felt like I had seen something that changed the architecture of our relationship forever. I tried to rationalize it. It's just an accident. Forget it. But the thought lingered. The curiosity was a poison, spreading fast. A gentle knock on my door made me jump. Alara. It was Julian. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Both of them were there. They looked regretful, stripped of their usual confident bravado. We wanted to apologize, Julian said, rubbing the back of his neck. We thought you were still asleep. It's awkward, and we didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. It's okay, I said quickly, perhaps too quickly. Really, it's normal. I'm not a prude. I saw them relax, just a fraction. And then, a thought entered my mind, a reckless, dangerous thought born of teenage hormones and a desperate need to not be the outsider in their world. I stepped back, inviting them in. Come in. We need to stop acting weird about this. They hesitated, then entered, sitting on the edge of my bed. The tension was still there, vibrating in the air. It's just... Adrian started. We never want you to think less of us. I could never. I said softly. I looked at them, really looked at them. They weren't just my protectors anymore, they were people with desires, just like me. And in that moment, the boundary that should have been steel felt like paper. You know? I said, my voice trembling. Maybe the reason it's so awkward is because we keep treating it like a crime. They looked at me, confused. What do you mean? Julian asked. I took a breath, knowing I was standing on a precipice. What if? What if we didn't hide it? What if I was curious too? The words hung in the air. Julian and Adrian exchanged a glance, shock mixed with something darker, something intense. Alara, are you serious? Adrian asked, his voice low. I don't want secrets, I whispered, reaching out to take their hands. We've always shared everything. Why is this different? They were silent. I could see the internal war behind their eyes, the protective instinct battling against a sudden, overwhelming temptation. Finally, Julian sighed, a sound of surrender. Okay, but just this once, to break the curiosity. And then, never again, it stays in this room. The world seemed to narrow down to just the three of us. The sunlight outside felt miles away. We moved with hesitation at first, fueled by a nervous energy, exploring a territory that had always been forbidden. It wasn't like the movies, it was clumsy, confusing, but underscored by a profound, terrifying intimacy. When the sun began to dip lower in the sky, we lay there in silence. The awkwardness I had feared didn't come immediately. Instead, there was a strange, heavy peace. We felt united by a secret that was ours alone. Later, we went to the kitchen to make lunch. We moved around each other with a new awareness, chopping vegetables and boiling pasta, as if we hadn't just shattered a fundamental societal rule. Julian smiled at me, passing a plate. Are you okay? He asked, his eyes searching mine. I'm okay, I replied. I think we're closer now. We love you, Alara, they said, almost in unison. I love you too. From that day on, things changed. Subtly, but undeniably. They treated me with a fragility they hadn't shown before, like I was made of glass. Our bond was tighter, suffocatingly so. We never spoke of that afternoon again. We buried it under layers of normalcy and silence. But as I look back now, with the clarity of adulthood, I see the cracks in the foundation. We had crossed a line that exists for a reason. I tell myself it was the foolish curiosity of youth, a desperate need for connection that went too far. I don't live in constant regret, but I do live with a shadow. Every time I look at them now, there is a flicker of that memory, a mixture of love and a dull, aching anxiety. We let our emotions and our curiosity drive us off a cliff, assuming we could fly. My story isn't one of triumph. It is a reminder. Curiosity is natural, especially when you are young and the world feels limitless. But boundaries are not there to restrict us. They are there to protect the things that matter most. Some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed. We traded innocence for a secret. And while we are still a family, we are a family built on a silence that is as heavy as it is deep. Please, value the relationships you have, but understand that true love also means respecting the lines that keep us safe. Don't risk a lifetime of complexity for a moment of wonder. Some things are better left as mysteries.